Yeah, I want to go over a few general things. Actually, if you notice that oil has been creeping up a little bit, and I think it's 103 a barrel on a WTI. Now, I do suspect that they got plans to do something with Iran soon for other reasons, but that's not really why oil is going up. Right now, oil is going up because of they had a glut on a Cushman exchange for a while, and they couldn't get. There was like they look at these statistics and they'd say there was a whole big oversupply of oil on it in the Cushman exchange, and it wasn't getting down into the refineries because most of the refineries were built around by Mississippi, and that's because we used to use mostly OPEC. We used a lot of OPEC oil. That was the reason for it. So the refineries are down there, so it wasn't getting down to that area. But now, even though they don't have the Keystone pipeline passed, they're using an alternate type of pipeline to get the oil down there, so it removed a good part of the bottleneck. So when they look at the statistics, it doesn't look like there's this big overabundance of oil in this one area where the supply is, pumping up, and that brings the price down. So now it's like, it's getting down to the refineries, and it's turned down to, it's gotten down to different levels. So in other words, they say, oh, there's bigger demand. It makes it look like there's bigger demand. So that's pushing the price up too, not just over Iran or anything like that. But I'm going to get in with some of that in a minute, though. But now you're looking at the prices, silver and the Dow, moving down a little bit. It's the Dow and the Nasdaq and all the S&P. It's not moving down too much, but I just want to point out something about this chart that was floating around that was comparing the 1929 rise in the stock market to what's going on today, and it looks very, very close to what's going on today on this chart, the way they use this chart. But you remember, there's all kinds of ways you can. Now, I think there's going to be a correction. Okay, I do think there's going to be a correction, but not like what they're implying. But I just have to tell you this: there's a lot of ways you can lie with statistics and numbers and charts and graphs. There's a lot of ways you can show things. What's interesting about that chart, though, when they're showing the correlation between the markets today and the markets back in the 1920s, and it looks like we're right at the point right before the 1929 crash. What they're doing is they're using the Dow today. The Dow, actually, they're not using the S&P. If they use the S&P and they use the correlation and they index it to a 100, it would not look like anything like that chart at all. It wouldn't look anything like that chart. But that does not mean it's due for correction, because I have pointed out for some months now, actually it's been going back since maybe mid-2013, that we've had 6 Hindenburg omens, and I mentioned this George Soros large S&P bearish bet he made back in mid-August 2013. I'm sure he's just patiently waiting for the, something to happen, and he'll cash it in, he'll make his money. And, I think there is going to be a correction, but, people are actually kind of like thinking it's going to be, an 80% correction or something like that, or 70% correction, and 90% correction. It's not going to be like that, I don't think. I think it's going to be like a 30% correction, possibly. That might be more like it. Maybe even a 40%, but that would be a lot, because they do have things in place today that could actually shore up the markets. And it actually came about during the Reagan administration, when after they had the October 1987 crash. So, I mean, I know there's limits to what they can possibly do electronically, but they will be able to keep it from going too far down. But since we had 30% up in 2013, just to say that we have 30% down in 2014, that's not really, that outlandish. So anyway, oil, I think, though, I mentioned oil going up, but I think oil is actually going to be the one, like I always said, that's really going to lead the charge for the metals. But it's really going to be over tensions in the Middle East. Now, I know there's people who disagree with this, but sometimes you can look at the inspectors and with the nuclear weapons and all that type of stuff. I tell you the truth, I don't really look at that so much as some other angles. Is the leadership in Iran trying to get nuclear weapons? Yeah, definitely. Should they? I don't know. I mean, But the way I look at it is, if they're trying to get nuclear weapons in the face of all these stringent sanctions and stuff and threat of attack, that means they're pretty hell bent on doing something bad in the future. It really means that. Even if if you can assume Israel's not even in the area, there's other games going on. You got to remember that the upper echelon of Iran is they're not tolerant of any other types of religions. Period. They really aren't. I mean, the Iranian people might be, but it's, that's always the game, man. It's always the people on the top. Now, the way I look at it, though, is like with, just how I look at it, but it's a fact that Iran has very low supply of uranium. So to pursue nuclear energy is kind of ridiculous, for that angle. The other thing is they have more natural gas and oil, that crude oil that can last them 100 years. They'd be the last people on this earth that would run out of natural gas and crude oil. So, I mean, for them to say we have to have nuclear power now and use uranium instead of thorium, which is uranium is for, everybody uses uranium because it makes nukes. I mean, that's the fact, So it's pretty obvious what they're doing. Now, why is North Korea allowed to have nukes? Why is that? You know what? That's the Illuminati scam game going on there, because North Korea, I'm gonna have to tell you this. I have to get in a little more conspiracy shit, but I see another angle on a lot of stuff, and it goes way back. Actually, this stuff has been old as the hills, man. But North Korea it could have been originally stopped in the first place before. It was actually, MacArthur would have stopped the whole damn thing. They said he would have started a nuclear war, but the problem is freaking China didn't have any nukes, and China wouldn't have, if they were backing up the North Koreans, it would have basically been one Korea today if MacArthur had his way. And it would have been under the democratic type of Korea that we have in South Korea, and life would be better for all Koreans all throughout the whole peninsula. But there's always games going on in D.C., and I'm telling you right now, there's one president that used to say it before he was president. He was actually a congressman. That was John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, back to when he was a congressman, he used to say that, a lot of these policymakers, it's like our people in the Army and the military and the Marine Corps and everything, they try to fight communism, and then it's the policymakers in Washington that totally fritter away all their efforts to stop communism. And actually, you've seen this game going on all the time, whether it's Vietnam, Korea, or wherever. So I'm going to tell you right now, it is it's really maybe it's out there for its conspiracy theory. I don't think it is a theory, but communism has always been backed by the Western elite, the real Western elite, the very top dogs. The very top dogs aren't really capitalists per se; they're control freaks. That's just what the hell it is. And, I put out something before about Australia being able to defend itself, because I think, even though they got the supposed nuclear umbrella of the UK and all this kind of stuff in the United States, if you really get down to it, you can see what the policymakers are doing. The policymakers are freaking doing things to make things not go the right way. And it's always made to look like it's a mistake, and oh, we tried, and and then they make excuses for, the dictators on the other side. Really, the game that's going on is the real top elite in this country have always been behind communism. They're control freaks to the max. If you look at all the screw-ups that happen in Washington, D.C., they're not screw-ups. And if you look currently at what Obama's been doing with firing all the nuclear generals and stuff like that, that's not a game that's to be taken like it's just a matter of politics or something. No, he's looking to implement some major policy changes where he's going to leave the United States very, very vulnerable. That's one reason I said, every country has a right to defend itself, including every person has a right to defend themselves. People who say Australia should not be allowed to defend itself are racist. That's all there is to it. It's like, right now, it's obvious that China is starting to spend a lot more money on its military, and when their military does exceed the United States, we're going to have an attack. So that's really what's going to happen, and Russia's going to do the same thing. You know, they're biding their time. Now, I know this is a silver update, but you know, you should look at the overall picture of what's happening, because a lot of people getting physical silver are get physical silver due to a possible future financial collapse in the West. I hope there's no financial collapse. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I know the silver conspiracy blogs out there talking about the skies falling this year. I think silver's going to go up in a lot in relation to the dollar quite a bit, and it's going to have a good year. And I highly suspect the attack what Iran is on this year too. I've been thinking this, but what is actually starting to make me think more so is that they're playing a game where Iran was offered peace terms and they had everything ironed out, and then all of a sudden they're not going along with the peace terms. They're going to get slammed. I don't know. Something isn't adding up with this whole deal. The fact that Iran is sending warships over, you know, near the United States, not too far away, tells me they're playing games to the max. And well, they're, you know, I'm just telling you right now, I think this is what's going to happen. I know, like, you know, war is extremely dirty business, no matter how you look at it. It always has been. But the thing is, with Iran, actually, the leadership in Iran is screwed up. I know that. But if you want to make a financial prediction as to what all this is going to mean, oil is going to go way the hell up. And we haven't seen nothing. 103 is nothing. That's what's going on today. When something happens in Iran, oil's going to jump like 20 bucks inside of a day. That fast. That fast. And that's when you're going to start seeing gold fly up, and you're also going to see oil, silver start taking off. And I think you will see that gold-silver ratio start closing in. When silver, I suspect that the next height for silver will be like the last time it peaked out at around 31 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. I think it's going to go to possibly below 30 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold, maybe 28. I think that's where it's going to. I wouldn't really try to push it to the limit there, but that is where I think it's going to go to before they temporarily fix the situation again, and you know, they stave off some problems, because I don't think the real top for silver is going to be till like 2017 or maybe the early 2018, around 2017, I think, where it's really going to get into the blow off top. But at that time, if there is actually a major worsening of the economic situations in the United States and across the Western world, and there's a major improvement in, you know, because actually, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, like, it's very difficult for China and Russia to move ahead very fast in a lot of things, but where they're getting a big jump start is all the best Western technology is actually going into those two countries, and they're basically, it's being controlled by our Western elite on the very top. I mean, not talking about, you know, even an average, you know, businessman that made $100 million. I'm not talking about those type of people, but the real top planners are looking for, you know, I think they're planning a global war, because if you look at past history, World War I was planned with global intentions, World War II was planned with global intentions, and out of the ashes comes, you know, they tried the League of Nations, then they tried the UN. Out of the next time, I don't, you know, doom and gloom. Out of the next time, it's going to be world government and nuclear disarmament and all this other garbage, and controlled by a global army and all this kind of crap. That's what I think the game is. That's what I think. I think it's got a few years down the road, though. It's not going to happen right away. But for this year, I think you still are going to do the dollar's going to be definitely worth. It's not going to crash this year like to oblivion or anything like that. No way in hell. It's got at least a few more years, if anything. And I don't know if it's ever going to crash to oblivion. I think it's getting too far out there, because it's the global planners, the globalists, and all that are basically, you know, a lot of their power and stuff is wrapped up with the U.S. dollar. It is. It is. It's never going to go away completely for quite a few years. There's going to have to be some really major cataclysmic events before it ever goes away. So I just want people to remember that. So, because I know when you start seeing silver move up, and say silver went through $50 this year, and like that radical, that's a major move, man. That's a freaking super duper move if it went through and broke an all-time record high this year due to unforeseen cataclysmic events in the Middle East, you know, oil prices going up, and due to a war in the Middle East. If it did that, the silver people would tell you the dollar's going to zero in no time short, and I'll bet you it doesn't. I'll bet you it doesn't. So don't be afraid to take some cash at that time and maybe do a little more prepping, because the real problems are going to, you know, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's, I just play 101 common sense. As soon as China and Russia actually have the strength past the United States in the military, past, you know, if there's like a lot of, you know, the United States just keeps disarming its nuclear weapons, they keep, you know, making their defenses weaker. I know it's really big, but I'm saying is there's a trend for the United States to kind of go less and less and less on its defense. At the same time, China is building up, and I know Russia is always building up behind the scenes. It's been known in other things. I don't want to reveal what I read, but I know it's been going along like this, and it's been a long-range plan. So long range, you're actually going to see a lot of problems. A lot of problems. I hate to say that, but I think that's really what's coming down the pike. But, you know, and that's one reason I say Australia should actually, in any country, should be able to defend itself against any types of aggressors and attacks. In the United States, you know, one of the places that are most vulnerable is obviously the large cities. If there's a major anything that happens, you know, actually those are our major, you know, if you look at, and this is the other thing where the United States can get crippled super fast, if you look at the GDP in the United States, right, and don't divide it up by state, don't divide it up by, you know, type of GDP, you don't divide it up by, you know, age group or anything like that, just divide it up by areas of the country. If you look at the GDP in the United States, 50% of it is actually all in the metropolitan areas of this country. It's not actually in rural America. You know, I hate to say that, but that's really what it is. Like, you know, some people don't like the Northeast United States in New York, New Jersey, but that's the biggest power center right there. Boston, a lot of people don't like, you know, I mean, a lot of people say, you know, some people say, you know, it's the, you know, the Yankees and stuff up there, but that's a big power center. Atlanta is a big power center. Miami, LA, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth area, Denver, Atlanta definitely, I said that, DC, but actually the Northeast, New Jersey's probably the, you know, right around New York City is the biggest power center. But, you know, anything at all that happened with an EMP, or anything, would immediately send the GDP of the United States down to like a trickle, because it's not spread out across the land. It's actually only in about a dozen areas of the United States where 50% of the GDP is actually coming from. So, you know, I'm going to tell you, like, with silver, it's part of your prepper types. It is a prepper type investment. It really is. But it's not for like a hurricane. It's not for like, you know, a short-term 2-day freaking catastrophe. It's for a long-term problem. It actually is. But that should not be your only emphasis. So I kind of diverged a little bit on this type of stuff, but I think that what's coming up long range is a hell of a lot worse than people want to think, and I don't want to think it either. But I can see the writing on the wall, more or less. Not that I'm being negative about it, but realistic. Realistic is all hell. And the only one you got to depend upon is yourself. So, and you know, that should go for countries too, like Australia. You know, Australia, I see them as being very close proximity of China. China needs oil so damn bad. Australia now has the biggest oil reserves proven in the entire world. I could see what if China had their, the Chinese regime had their way, they would take that. They would just say it's ours. They would do that. And I don't know if the United, supposedly, theoretically, the UK and the United States, supposedly allies. I don't know. I wouldn't trust that deal. I wouldn't trust that deal. I tell you what, the Aussies and I think this is the way it ought to be everywhere across the globe. You should be able to defend your own nation. If you defend your own nation, actually, nationalism is a way to thwart the global power. Because what's going on is, actually, communism was, maybe it was born from Karl Marx, but, Karl Marx's theories weren't, like, totally off base in a lot of ways. Some things were actually correct about some of his shit. But the way it was implemented and where it was actually pushed was from big money in the West. And I'm telling you right now, actually, communism and global, like Vladimir Putin and George Bush, they could be best buddies. I'm telling you right now, that's just how they are. No games. They work together, man. They work together for a common cause, and it's screwing over the people, man. So, independence is one of your #1 goals. Silver is part of your reason for that. I think the prices are going to keep going up. Like I said, the oil went up partly not because of possible tensions in Iran. It was because of the major supply gut at the Cushman Exchange has been, drawn down somewhat from alternate pipelines that were able to reach the Mississippi. And I don't expect like this big market crash this year. There's going to be a market downturn, significant, but not like the bottom's going to fall out. These guys in the silver blogs, they exaggerate the hell out of everything. But eventually, we're going to have some major problems, I think. And I think this is planned by the elite. If you look really carefully at history and what's going on and what happened in wars and who backed who, communism basically was born in the West. They make it look like it's the enemy of the West, but that's another game they play for money. It's another game they play for money and control. Conflict produces change, and that's what happens. So, but anyway, just hang on with your investment and watch that silver-gold ratio. I think the next peak, when it really, it's going to have one intermediate peak before the final peak. I don't think it's going to go, there's going to be like a lot of little peaks, but I think there's going to be one major intermediate peak before the final peak, where it's going to possibly go up to, I think it's 72 to 75 is going to be the next major intermediate peak before the ultimate peak. But I think the silver-gold ratio then is going to be about 28 to 30 to 1. Watch that ratio especially. Right now, it's way too early, but you should still be, you don't have to be in silver accumulatory type of stage, because I said, this type of investment when you're buying coins is actually more than just an investment. It's a little more than that. And like I said, it's not for prepping for an earthquake or a hurricane. It's for a long-range financial problem. And it should not be your only type of thing you do. Not at all. Anyway, over and out. I just figured I'd present some little bit different information here, because I think things are going to actually be very exciting this year. But it's not going to be... I almost know how the silver bloggers are going to pump this up. They'll wind up temporarily fixing things again for a few years. I think it's a few years down the road before we see the real final blow off top.